When I read the headline that China is operating more than 100 police stations around the world, sometimes in secret and often to surveil their own citizens, I realized that not every citizenship is equal. Just as the United States operates government offices around the world to check up on its taxpayers, the reality is that holding citizenship from an empire may have its advantages, but it also has a lot of disadvantages. For years now, I've been seeing how countries like China and even my home country, the United States, have been targeting and checking up on their citizens overseas, doing all sorts of things that Western governments frown upon, even while countries like the United States have a whole slew of regulations for its own citizens overseas and infrastructure that checks up on that. And it's funny because I don't hear a lot about St. Lucia checking up on its citizens. I don't hear a lot about Georgia poisoning its own dissidents in parks in London. You just don't hear smaller countries doing that kind of stuff. And that's not to say that smaller countries never do anything bad, but there's something to be said about the fact that even if a small country totally falls apart, the resources that that country has to go after its own citizens who may live somewhere overseas, either for political reasons or for financial reasons like taxing them, it just doesn't really work. We talk since the beginning of Nomad Capitalist about how there are two countries that have this universal citizenship-based taxation. One is the tiny African nation of Eritrea, which imposes a small diaspora tax on all Eritreans living overseas, and the other is the United States, which, while there are plenty of exemptions that we help clients use to legally reduce their taxes even into the single digits, you still are a U.S. taxpayer with all the filing requirements, all the regulations, all the restrictions when it comes to opening bank accounts. People pick on Eritrea for that couple of percent tax, and yet we just met an Eritrean a couple of weeks ago and driving a taxi, and he's like, yeah, I've never even heard of that tax. And so for me, the message is simple. If you have just one citizenship, especially if it's a citizenship of a big country, that could cost you a lot of money. And as some people have learned over the years, it could even bankrupt you. For people wanting to live off the grid, I say that you want to be on as many grids as possible. You want to have multiple citizenships, but have them from countries that aren't hell-bent on following their own citizens around the world. They apply their own laws when you live in their country, and when you live somewhere else, you follow those laws, whether it's the tax rate. They let you leave your own country and go somewhere else and pay whatever taxes they charge, including if that's zero. You're seeing more Western countries kind of pushing back on that, making it more difficult. Still possible, but just throwing more obstacles in the way to leave their tax system because they really increasingly see citizenship as an obligation where you have to serve them rather than you're part of the tribe and they do something to sustain you. And, we see people who leave countries like Iran that the West say, oh, they're doing terrible stuff. And yet, unless those Iranians go back home, like generally not much bad stuff happens to them. They live in the United States, they live in Europe, they go on and live their lives. But if you're an American, or if you're from China, or from other big countries, your government may follow you around and put all kinds of restrictions on you, including citizenship-based taxation, including telling you how you can run your business, telling you have to follow their laws when it comes to doing business in other countries, even if that's not how those other countries do business. And so the bottom line is, if you value freedom, if you want to keep your wealth, if you want to grow your business, having one citizenship alone isn't the answer. Now, we've been telling you for years to get dual citizenship, and I wanted to share a comment thread that happened here a while ago where somebody said multiple nationalities are dangerous. When the taxes will be based on your passports, you will have to pay the highest taxes of all the countries corresponding to your passports. It will come brutally, and you may not be able to give up your nationalities. This is, I think, kind of a U.S. perspective where during the pandemic, it was practically impossible in many countries, many embassies, many U.S. embassies overseas, to give up your citizenship. There were articles in the Wall Street Journal and other publications. Americans are upset they can't give up their citizenship. There were, at one point, I think, as few as 6 embassies open and handling renunciations. And it became a thing where they're like, did you hear about this from Nomad Cat? Like, how did you find like our embassy, like this one embassy? Like, there was some of the smaller embassies were taking renunciation appointments, and so the U.S. joins the company of some pretty repressive countries in making it difficult to give up your citizenship. And of course, they whitewash, oh, if you want to renounce it just because of tax, and sure, some people do that, and I did it. Tax was not my leading factor. There are plenty of countries where it costs pretty much nothing, if not literally nothing, to renounce. And even during the pandemic, you were able to do that. And so this idea that having multiple nationalities means you're going to be taxed because taxes will be based on your passports, I do happen to think that there will be a couple of Western countries that will move towards either full citizenship-based taxation or much more likely a kind of de facto citizenship-based taxation where it's kind of through the back door. There's just so many restrictions where, hey, you've been living here, you're a citizen, we're going to make it really, really hard to leave, and a lot of people are going to trip up, and then we're just going to come in and tax you, and we're going to threaten you if you don't pay, and people are just going to give up and pay. I don't think that's going to apply to most countries' passports. I think obviously countries that are in the business of helping people get another citizenship, like a Caribbean citizenship by investment program, or any country that has citizenship by investment, that would just be dumb to do that. You have countries that have cultures of people emigrating. So whether that's Ireland or certain countries in Eastern Europe or otherwise, they understand immigration. Even the United Kingdom, I mean, they have a whole section in the bloody newspaper, expat. You go to the British Embassy in some countries, they have an afternoon tea once a month for the expats. You don't pay British tax while you're living in Dubai, for example, but the embassy lets you come over. They pay for your scones. So even among, the difference between the US and the UK is different. The idea that these smaller countries or countries that have had a history of immigration, or quite frankly, this is hard to believe if you're living in the West, there are just countries that don't care. You know what they'd say in Malaysia if you want to go live overseas? Like, okay, cool, like, great. Like, why are we even talking about this? And so what one person replied to this comment was, it's not easy to implement worldwide taxation like the US does. Number one, I just think a lot of places don't have the desire. Now, maybe if their country was as big as the US or as China, they would have the desire, but their country isn't, so they don't. They're just used to like, hey, like we don't have total control over everything that happens in the world. That's just kind of built into the psyche. It's easy to say we're going to tax people around the world, but it's hard to implement. Now, I think that a Canada or an Australia could do it because there's so many people who are angry. There's so much hatred these days in Western countries that you're seeing headlines. Some left-wing politician, let's tax based on citizenship. Nobody should be getting a free ride. You're part of the community. How dare you be Canadian and not pay us? As if being born there was your fault. I think some people might go along with that. And there's just this idea that you must follow the system in those countries. Obviously, if it's a law, you should do it, but you should have a second passport to be ready to get out before that happens. And sometimes you might not have much notice, which is why I think having the second passport early is better. I mean, when there were some changes in the US tax law, you had like 3 weeks to prepare. Literally 3 weeks. There's no passport you can get legally in 3 weeks. I know there's been a long-term scheme run by a constantly changing cast of characters. You get a Mexican passport in 11 days. Doesn't work. Most countries are not going to try and tax you on a worldwide basis. There may be some Western countries that will try. Listen, maybe China was now, as they asserted more control in Hong Kong, said, okay, if you're mainland Chinese citizen and you go to live in Hong Kong, we're not saying that's not expatriate. That's not, you haven't left, in our opinion. You might find, Syria or something might be like, we're sick of this. We're going to claim we're going to do it, and they're not going to do it. Just as Eritrea does. Other than a handful of Western countries where people are going to cower in fear and say, well, my entire life is based around being Canadian, so I guess what can I do? I'll just pay. I don't think you're going to have that happen. So the benefit of living in other countries means you can legally reduce or eliminate your taxes. If you're an American, obviously, to eliminate your taxes in most situations would require expatriation. Although there are some situations, if you're willing to have restrictions on how you use the money, that you could, as an entrepreneur, reduce your taxes to zero. Certainly, if you make $120,000 or less, you can reduce to basically zero as well. But I'd rather live in those countries that let me choose my tax rate, first of all. And I want to be a citizen of a country that I believe is going to respect that. Not because my entire life revolves around tax, but because I don't trust a country, I don't trust a government that says, we'll tell you where you can go and under what conditions. I've already acknowledged, and I say this year after years of leaving my home country, I've already acknowledged if I were to live in my home country, all right, you got me. I'm going to play by your rules. I'm going to pay whatever you ask. Like, that's the deal. But if I want to leave, you should just let me leave. Because my reasons for wanting to leave really had nothing to do with tax. That was kind of the anecdotal, I bet, how does that work with tax? But you see which countries try and shame their own expats. Oh, you just don't want to pay tax. First of all, even if you didn't, who cares? We have clients, I don't want to pay tax. And we have other people, such as myself, which are much more nuanced. They don't like the way the country's heading. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel whatever. Why should your country tell you that you can't leave? Most countries in the world don't tell you that, because even some countries in Europe, all right, cool, you're gone, great. You're not using our roads. You're not sending your kids to our schools. What do we care? Great, come on back if you want. So the U.S., another commenter says, can enforce worldwide citizenship-based taxation to their historically unique position in the world. It will be hard for another country like Czechia, the Czech Republic, or Turkey, or Malaysia to do the same. And I agree. Again, I just don't think there's a desire. I want us to get rid of the dogma where every country's like yours. It's just not. The average, I mean, you should go to some of the countries I go to. We go to pay my bills for a property I have in Montenegro every year. I asked Anka, the real estate maestro, can we pay online? She's like, no, it's much easier to pay with cash. You go, and there's some guys like playing cards at a card table, smoking at 2:30 in the afternoon. You just go in, you knock on the door, you give them the cash, like they write it down like in a book, like with a pen. Like that's the system. You think those guys are chasing after you when you move to, to Dubai, or when you move to, Vanuatu for tax? Are you kidding me? They could care less. And so, here's the last comment. This is why you leave their tax systems now and solidify your status in a tax haven. If they try to go purely on citizenship, okay, I don't agree with this. You simply renounce before they implement citizenship-based taxation. Sure. Now again, is this trying to always move around so you don't have to pay tax? No. And by the way, in 2023, I've demonstrated for a lifestyle that I want, I'm willing to pay a bit more tax because I did and I will. What it's saying is, why should the country where you're from, why should a country where you merely hold citizenship decide they get to control you no matter where you go? If you live in one country, you follow that country's laws. And if it's not where you're from, they should just let go. And so I have multiple citizenships. I have more of an affinity for some of those countries than people might believe. It's not entirely transactional. The goal of having a diverse portfolio of passports is strategic. But, when someone says, hey, here's our citizenship, we like you, I'm like, oh, that's nice. I like the country, I respect it. What can I do? Maybe I'll hire some people. Maybe I'll do this. Right? I have an affinity. In the same way that you might have an affinity for someone you have a relationship, a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, if that person that you loved, you have an affinity for, becomes abusive, the affinity is going to go away. And you're going to take steps to protect yourself. And it's not always about money. It's about preserving your rights. And so, if you have multiple citizenships and one country decides to screw with you, it could be taxation. It could be, we're going to come and try and take your money. It could be some kind of asset seizure. Generally speaking, if you can have assets diversified from where you live and from where you're a citizen, that's a good thing. I'm not saying don't have any accounts or any property where you have residence or citizenship, but I'm saying have plenty outside. That means even when worst comes to worst, listen, there may come a day when I lose some asset. I don't think I will, but there may come a day when it's like, oh, this country's totally going to pot. And I'm like, all right, there goes 1% of my net worth. I kind of like the pillows in that place. I'll never have those pillows again. And there'll be people in the comments section laughing because I lost 1% of my net worth or less. But, that may happen. I think the odds of that are relatively low. You want to be ready to push back against someone who's going to become abusive to you because they believe they own you, because they're controlling. You don't want that in a personal relationship, and you don't want it from a country. I mean, think about it. Who are you more intimate with? Your relationship partner or your government? Like, you wouldn't tolerate abusive behavior in your relationship. I hope you wouldn't. Why would you tolerate it from your government? And this is why, if you only have one passport, you have to tolerate it. You have no choice. They can push you around. As Gavin Newsom says, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go, right? That's like when an abuser says, you're not going to leave. Where are you going to go? Your sister doesn't like you anymore. She's not going to. You have nowhere to go. You've got to stay here. And that's where they get the power. They take advantage of that. Unless you're a citizen. I think it means as long as you're a citizen, the majority of countries in the world, you'll still have places to go. By the way, this is a little extreme, but I think there will come a time when if you're a citizen of a big country, you'll have fewer places that want to give you a residence permit. By the way, I know people, Americans who are in Malaysia, they have had trouble. I think we've solved this for one person. They've had trouble getting Malaysian residence, M2H, because it required some documents that had to be presented to the embassy. The embassy's like, oh, we don't do that. Like every other embassy, every other country is like, yeah, sure, whatever you need, we'll print it out for you today. U.S. Embassy was like, no, we don't want to do that. So having as many citizenships as possible means you can present yourself in the best possible way, means you can protect yourself from abusive relationships. Look at what happened even during the Trump administration. Oh, let's go after TikTok. Let's go after China. What did the Chinese companies say? Oh, we're gonna cut off U.S. business here. What happens when there's a time when the Western world is in a recession or is falling, and Asian markets are where you want to be? Our business, we have people from all around the world as our customers. Nomad Capitalist Live, Kuala Lumpur in 2024 again. Why? We get a diverse group of people from all around the world. We don't rely on just one country's population. The Americans who really want to come to the event and who see the value, they come. I don't want to be reliant on any one market, and you shouldn't want to be either. Having only one citizenship kind of forces you to be. And so be diversified. There's a tiny chance that some country, the wrong thing's going to happen. But what I'm tired of hearing is there's nowhere to run. They're going to find you. Klaus Schwab's going to find you anywhere. Singapore is going to be invaded tomorrow. These are things that people say when they want to live on one grid, they want to have one citizenship, they want to take the abuse if it comes, and they're going to always have a defense, while at the same time being angry at the politicians and saying, oh, if only we elected this guy, all the problems will go away. Wouldn't it just be a lot easier to be a citizen of multiple countries? Now, an American's always an American when it comes to a bank that may not want to take Americans. You could have the U.S. and 10 other citizenships. It won't make a difference. If you're Russian right now, there are going to be countries that don't want to give you citizenship. Maybe if you renounce it, maybe they'll take you. But Russians are Russians are Russian. I mean, each passport can stand on its own in terms of certain people that want to restrict you. You can give up that passport and possibly solve the problem, but there are going to be other options that are available to you. And so while you have a choice, take advantage of the opportunity to get residences, to get citizenships. I think it'll protect your business. I'd much rather in the 21st century say, hi, I'm a St. Lucian. I want to start a company. I want to do business in your country. I want to get a residence permit for starting a business, and I'm going to come and hire people. And there are very few countries in the world that judge that. Yeah, the U.S., if they're going to judge you for being St. Lucian. If you're an American, they can't really do anything to you. If you're a Canadian or a European, you're going to come and all right, whatever. If you give up your U.S. citizenship, maybe they'll give you a little bit of grief depending on where you live. But I can tell you, most countries I go, oh yeah, St. Lucia, yeah, what a beautiful island. Why are you here? They tell me. And so, understanding how non-judgmental most countries are, how little they want to abuse you, at least extraterritorially, to me, is why you want to be very careful of citizenships in big, powerful empires, especially ones that are declining, and you want to be diversified to make sure you have them. Nomad Capitalist helps you do it. If you're just starting out, take a look at Nomad Capitalist Live. It's our annual live event. You'll learn a lot about this stuff over the course of 4 days. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/live. If you are at the seven-figure net worth level, learn how we help people create diversified portfolios, residences, citizenships, bank accounts, asset protection, tax reduction.